The ballroom at the Ouagadougou presidential palace sparkled with golden chandeliers and voices filled with power. Leaders, ambassadors, and foreign media crowded the grand hall for the most anticipated summit of the year. Cameras rolled, smiles were rehearsed, every second was being broadcast live. And yet, behind a tall curtain near the buffet table, a faint sound broke through the perfection. It wasn't a speech, it wasn't a phone ringing, it was a cry, soft, muffled, but raw. Most ignored it. Some heard it and dismissed it as part of the background noise, but not President Ibrahim Traoré. In the middle of welcoming a European envoy, he suddenly paused. His smile faded, his eyes narrowed, scanning the corners of the room. An advisor leaned in to whisper, but Traoré raised his hand. He had heard something others didn't, and without warning he turned away from the podium, walked off the red carpet, and headed straight toward the curtain. The room fell awkwardly quiet. The cameras panned quickly, unsure what was happening. Security reached for their radios. What they didn't know was that history was about to be made in front of their eyes, and no one, not even Traoré, was ready for what he was about to find behind that curtain. Her name was Awa, 52 years old, widowed, mother of 4. And today, she was scheduled to mop the floors of the East Wing, not to be seen, not to be heard, just to clean up before the speeches ended. But Awa had made a mistake. She had forgotten her cleaning badge and, thinking she had enough time, snuck in through the back hallway to quickly wipe a spill near the buffet before the officials arrived. Then she saw the sea of dignitaries, the wealth, the gowns, the polished shoes walking past her worn sandals, and something inside her broke. That morning, her youngest son had asked for school shoes. That same morning she had told him no, for the 4th time. That same morning she had cleaned a toilet where the water didn't even flush properly. So when she ducked behind the curtain to wipe her face and hide her shame, the tears wouldn't stop. And then she heard footsteps, fast, getting closer. Before she could dry her face, the curtain was pulled aside. There stood Ibrahim Traoré, the president, looking straight at her tear-soaked eyes. Awa gasped. She stumbled to her knees, whispering, "I'm sorry, sir. I'm not supposed to be here. Please forgive me." But the next thing he did, no one expected. The cameras couldn't capture it at first. Security moved quickly to block the view. Foreign diplomats leaned over to see what the president was doing. But before anyone could react, President Traoré dropped to his knees. He didn't ask her to stand. He didn't ask who she was. He simply opened his arms. Awa tried to pull away, ashamed and terrified. "Please, I didn't mean to," but Traoré whispered, "You have nothing to apologize for." And then, in front of the entire summit, he hugged her. A full embrace. Tight, long, real. The entire hall went still, no speeches, no claps. Just the quiet sound of one woman weeping in the arms of a president. Phones came out. Journalists started filming. Security froze, unsure whether to intervene or wait. Behind the cameras, even some guards wiped their eyes. Because in that moment, no one saw a president and a cleaner. They saw something else. They saw a man who chose humanity over protocol. But what happened after that hug would leave the world in complete disbelief and reveal a past connection between Awa and Traoré that even she didn't know existed. After the hug, the room seemed to hold its breath. Awa, still trembling, felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. It was President Traoré. He lowered his voice so only she could hear. "You are stronger than you think, Awa. Your story matters." She blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the kindness from a man she had only seen on TV. But what surprised her most was the whisper that followed. "I once walked a path not so different from yours." Before she could ask what he meant, he nodded to security and quietly walked back to the podium. The summit resumed, but the energy had shifted. The powerful moment was captured on dozens of phones and by every news camera. But who was this woman to move a president so deeply? And what past did he see in her? Awa had spent years working behind the scenes, unnoticed and unappreciated. What no one knew was that beneath her worn clothes beat the heart of a woman who had sacrificed everything for her family, just like Ibrahim Traoré's own mother. That night, in her tiny home, Awa replayed the moment over and over. Her tears weren't just sadness, they were relief. Relief that her story had finally been seen. 2 days before the ceremony, Awa's life was filled with hardship. Her youngest son, Isa, was sick. The local clinic was out of medicine. She had worked extra shifts cleaning offices to buy medicine herself. But the money wasn't enough. Her oldest daughter, Mariam, was about to drop out of school because they couldn't afford the fees. Each night, Awa whispered prayers for strength, for a miracle. Her family's struggle was invisible to the world, just like her job. Meanwhile, in a quiet room of the presidential palace, Traoré was reading reports on poverty and inequality in his country. He was reminded of his own childhood, the long walks barefoot, the hunger, the nights when his mother cried silently. He had promised himself one day he would change things, not with speeches, but with real actions. He didn't know then that fate would soon give him a chance. As the summit continued, aides worked to piece together who Awa was. Security was baffled. She had no official clearance, but Traoré remembered something his mother once told him. Our stories are threads in the same cloth. When we pull one, the others must follow. Awa's story and his were connected in ways no one expected. That evening, Traoré called his closest advisor. "Find out everything about that woman," he said quietly, "and bring her to me tomorrow." The next day, before the ceremony, Awa was surprised when palace officials approached her with an invitation. She felt fear and hope collide. Little did she know, her life, and the life of Burkina Faso, was about to change forever. The next morning, Awa was cleaning the palace corridors when 2 officials quietly approached her. "Please come with us," they said gently, guiding her through hallways she had only dreamed of entering. Awa's heart pounded. Why was she being called? Had she done something wrong, or was this a chance at something new? They led her to a small room near the presidential offices. There, waiting, was President Ibrahim Traoré himself. His face was calm, kind, but serious. "Awa," he said softly, "I want to hear your story. Not as a president, but as a fellow human being." For the first time in years, Awa felt seen, not as a cleaner, but as a person. She told him about her family, the struggles, the fear of never escaping poverty. Traoré listened without interruption. Then he said something she never expected. "You are part of the future we are building. Together." In that moment, Awa's tears weren't just for sorrow anymore. They were for hope. News of the hug was spreading fast, but the real story was just beginning. Behind the scenes, Traoré instructed his team to meet with Awa's family. They arranged medical care for Isa, school fees for Mariam, and a small financial support for her household. But more than aid, Traoré wanted to change the system. The cleaning staff at the palace, often forgotten, were suddenly being prioritized. Better pay, improved working conditions, and respect. Awa's story became a symbol, not just for Burkina Faso, but for the world. The president's choice to publicly embrace her broke protocol, yes, but it also broke barriers. It reminded everyone that leadership isn't just about power, it's about heart. Yet questions remained. What exactly did Traoré whisper in that hug? Why did it silence the room? And what would happen next? In exclusive interviews, aides revealed what Traoré whispered to Awa. "You are not alone," he said. "Your courage shines brighter than any spotlight." That simple, powerful phrase echoed far beyond the palace walls. It became a rallying cry for dignity, kindness, and the fight against invisibility. The world watched as videos of the hug went viral. Some critics tried to dismiss it as a staged moment, but millions saw through the noise. For many, it was proof that true leadership still exists, a leader who sees the pain behind the polished image. But the story was far from over. There was one more secret connection between Awa and Traoré that neither had yet revealed, one that would bring tears to even the hardest hearts. Days after the summit, a small envelope was quietly delivered to President Traoré's office. It was from Awa. Inside, a shaky letter filled with raw honesty and pain. She wrote about her family's hardships, the sacrifices no one saw, and her fear of being forgotten by the world. But amid the struggle, she shared a secret. Her late husband had once saved Traoré's life during a difficult moment years ago, an act Traoré never knew about. Awa wrote, "I am not just a cleaner. I am part of your story." The letter moved Traoré deeply. He realized this embrace wasn't just a random act of kindness. It was a reunion of unseen threads in their lives. The letter wasn't meant for public eyes, but the message was clear. Sometimes, the smallest connections hold the greatest power. With the letter in hand, Traoré made a quiet vow. He called a meeting with his top advisors. "Change must go beyond gestures," he said firmly. "We will build programs for families like ours, support for education, healthcare, and jobs." A new initiative was born that week, the Hidden Heroes Project. It aimed to uplift every worker behind the scenes who kept the country running, but often went unnoticed. Awa was invited to be a symbol of hope and courage. But the most important promise was personal. Traoré promised to never forget the faces behind the power. For the people watching at home and the officials in the palace, this was a lesson in humility and humanity. Videos of the hug flooded social media. The world was captivated, not just by the moment, but by the story behind it. News outlets interviewed experts, social workers, and everyday people moved to tears. Some shared stories of their own struggles and gratitude for leaders who care. In small villages and big cities, people talked about dignity, kindness, and the meaning of leadership. For many, Ibrahim Traoré was no longer just a president. He was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the highest office can belong to someone who sees every person's pain and responds with a hug. But as admiration grew, so did curiosity. What would Awa say about this moment? What did the future hold for both her and Traoré? The answers would come, slowly and beautifully. Despite the world watching, Awa stayed humble and quiet. She didn't seek fame or praise. Her days returned to cleaning the palace halls, but something inside had changed. She now walked with a small but steady confidence, a secret strength from knowing she had touched the heart of a leader. But her tears during that ceremony had a deeper reason. That morning, her son Isa had fallen seriously ill. The hospital was far, and medicine was expensive. She had been crying quietly, overwhelmed by helplessness and fear. When Traoré hugged her, it was not just an act of kindness. It was a moment of recognition that her pain mattered. Awa carried a heavy burden, but the hug gave her hope. Hope that she wasn't invisible. In her heart, she whispered a prayer for strength, for her family, and for a better future. The phrase Traoré whispered in that hug echoed in millions of hearts. "You are not alone." But what no one knew was how much those words meant to Awa. The president's whisper wasn't just comfort, it was a promise that the government would stand with those who felt forgotten. Awa later revealed that the whisper gave her courage to keep fighting, to keep dreaming. She kept the memory close during long nights, when Isa's fever spiked and when bills piled up. That whisper became a lifeline, not just for Awa, but for many who watched and found hope in it. Sometimes the smallest words can save a life. The hug sparked something bigger than anyone expected. In villages far from the capital, people shared stories of struggle and kindness. Teachers, farmers, nurses, and cleaners felt seen for the first time. Local radio stations replayed the moment, inviting listeners to talk about the dignity of work and the power of compassion. Awa's story inspired others to speak up about their own hardships and dreams. Traoré's act of humanity wasn't just a headline. It was a movement. Leaders in other countries began to take notice, praising the courage it took to break protocol for compassion. But as the ripples spread, one question lingered on everyone's mind. What would happen next? Would this moment change history or fade like a passing headline? The answer was waiting, quietly, patiently. Weeks passed after the ceremony, but Awa's son Isa's condition worsened. Doctors said he needed urgent care that was hard to afford. Awa felt the crushing weight of fear return, threatening to steal the hope she had found. Then, unexpectedly, a team from the president's office appeared at her door. They brought medicine, arranged hospital visits, and promised support through the new Hidden Heroes program. President Traoré's promise was no longer just words, it was action. Awa wept, not from pain, but from relief. She realized this hug had sparked a change that saved her son's life. At the hospital, Traoré himself visited Isa, smiling softly as he whispered, "You're strong, just like your mother." That day, the gap between leader and people grew smaller, bound by love and courage. The story of Awa and Traoré spread like wildfire, inspiring people everywhere. Communities began organizing to support one another, neighbors helping neighbors, strangers sharing meals and stories. In schools, children learned the true meaning of leadership, kindness, courage, and empathy. The president's act of humanity became a symbol of hope in a troubled time. Critics fell silent as millions saw a leader who chose heart over protocol. For many, this wasn't just a moment, it was the start of a new era. An era where even the smallest voice could be heard, where compassion could rewrite history, and where one hug reminded the world that behind every title is a human soul. As we close this story, remember Awa's tears, Isa's courage, and Traoré's embrace. Sometimes, it's not the grand speeches or plans that change the world. It's a simple act of kindness. This story reminds us that true leadership listens, feels, and acts. Now it's your turn to keep this spirit alive. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment your feelings or your own stories of hope, and subscribe for more real-life moments that remind us of our shared humanity. Together, let's spread kindness. One story, one hug at a time. Thank you for watching. Your voice matters. Your heart matters.